We want to know how steep was that hill you guys were walking up? Because someone was a bit out of breath.
It was a very steep hill. It was a bit of a long uphill chase, that one, that we hoped that Mr. Rains might have stopped and talked to us, but he chose not to, so we had to push on, even if some of us reporters aren't as fit as others.
Must be the heat up there, Dan.
Humidity.
Humidity.
Why are you running?
Who are you?
What's got to do with you?
4 months ago, alright?
Until they clean up their yard, the rats won't go away.
We don't know it.
Is this all hocus pocus?
Can you say, abracadabra, here's your pay?
I'm pretty fit, Abdullah. I can keep running.
Go. It's called a current affair Australia. Is that what I know?
Have a lovely day.
Well, hello, I'm Steve Marshall.
Hello, Steve Marshall. I'm Lizzie Pearl.
G'day, Lizzie Pearl. Welcome to another episode of That's ACA, where we take you behind the scenes of Australia's most popular current affairs show, A Current Affair. You happy?
We're happy with that. And we love a deep dive.
We
don't
do
we, Steve?
indeed, we do. This is where we roll up our sleeves over a number of weeks, months even, to bring investigations to light, to shine a light on issues that would otherwise be buried. Mm-hmm. And there's no other person in the business better at bringing you these investigations than Dan Nolan from Brizzy, from our ACA Brizzy office. G'day, Dan.
Hello, Steve. Hello, Lizzie. That was a very strong introduction there. Thank you, mate. Very kind of you.
Let's hope you can back it up.
Yeah, don't let us down.
Dan, let's talk tax. Often very boring, but you, my friend, have managed to peel back an onion on a huge issue which we did not know about. Talk us through it.
It's true, Steve, and look, once you start to see these disturbing elements of how the ATO has been conducting some of its investigations, it's very hard to unsee this stuff once you've seen it.
Yeah.
And the more that we keep digging, the more that we keep finding. I think that the starting point for this is that most Australians probably are unaware of just the extraordinary powers the Australian Tax Office has. It's the only government agency that can knock on your door, come into your house, take away whatever it deems necessary for an investigation without even getting a warrant from the court. So it can just do that all on its own. It can compel you to answer questions in an interview. They're called coercive powers, where you don't have a right to remain silent. Now, the Australian public never voted on these powers being given to the ATO. It just happened. And I don't think people even really understand it until you are the subject of it.
Yeah, and you found a couple of subjects, 2 case studies that you filed separate investigations on. Talk us through the first one. Jay Jang, he had a huge issue and a huge battle that ended in devastating consequences for a family member, right? That's
right, Steve. So yeah, we started looking into Jay's case back in June, and again, it sounded at the start that all of this horrible stuff couldn't have happened all as a result of a tax issue. But as we kept digging and investigating, all of it was confirmed. It was confirmed by court documents. It was confirmed by court judgments. But Jay was a businessman. He was running an alcohol company, and he had got what's called a private ruling. So if you've got a new product, you can go to the tax office and get a private ruling for how that's going to be taxed. So he got several of these private rulings to have that his product was going to be taxed a certain way. And then the tax office changed it. Now, that had devastating impacts for his business. So he took that to the courts. It was going through the federal court. It was getting close to a hearing, the actual hearing for that, for a umpire to decide, for a federal court judge to decide who was right. At that important juncture, the ATO then hit him with a criminal charge of fraud, threw him in jail for the night, right before Christmas, tried to extradite him to the Gold Coast, and if that had been successful, he could have spent 2 weeks in jail waiting for the courts to reopen. Mm. And these were on fraud charges, which they then carried on for 2.5 years, and then they dropped the charges with no evidence to offer. There had been no fraud committed there. But but it was done at this really critical time that if he'd been successful, if they'd taken him away, if they'd put him in jail and he didn't get bail, his whole business could have collapsed, and he wouldn't have had the funds to continue fighting the civil case in the federal court, which was still going. He eventually had his day in the federal court. He won that. He beat them there. The criminal charges were dropped. But you mentioned the devastating price that Jay paid, particularly personally. During this investigation that the ATO was doing, which when they come for you, it is relentless, according to people that have been subject to this. And his sister stepped in to try to assist with these businesses, and she became a company director on one of the businesses. He ended up he had to take his business to New Zealand and then import it to Australia to get around this tax issue and all sorts of complicated stuff. Once his sister got involved, the tax office then turned their attention to her. They hit her with a garnishee notice. Now, a garnishee notice is where the tax office just decides that you've now got a debt to the tax office, and they start garnishing your wage, which is taking money from your wage directly from your employer. And so they'd contacted her employer. She was an academic, his sister. They contacted her employer with this garnishee notice. She was incredibly embarrassed and didn't handle this at all. And as a result of what Jay certainly blames it on the tax office, she sadly took her own life. And so she was not even really involved in the business. She'd only come in to help out her brother because of this pursuit that the ATO had put him under, and she ended up paying for it with her life. So Jay's come through the other side, but Jay, the thing that we discovered back in June or July when we ran the story, is that there'd been a particular investigator working on Jay's case, a former Queensland police officer by the name of Anthony Rains. Now, we reported back in July that there were some issues with Jay's case, some misleading witness statements that had been tendered, and that were also providing, incorrect information that was being tendered to the court. And this was in his criminal case that could have resulted in him going to jail. And so we exposed that back in July, and we made the decision that this was serious enough that we needed to name Anthony Rains and show him he's an Australian tax office investigator. He's a very powerful individual. He's got access to these powers that you or I would never get access to. And we named him back in July because there was enough evidence in Jay's case that we felt there needed to be more done about this and more investigation into Mr. Rains. And then lo and behold, a few months later in October, the Supreme Court in Brisbane comes down with a judgment in another case with some of the most serious findings of misconduct against Anthony Rains that you'd probably ever read in a judgment of this kind.
Yeah, that was the Supreme Court judge, wasn't it, in Brisbane, and he found 11 instances of really poor conduct by this investigator, Rains. And he's an ex-copper too, right, Dan?
Yes.
This guy, you would think would be the perfect investigator for the ATO to work out, bring balance to an investigation. But here he got absolutely smashed by the Supreme Court judge, yeah?
He did, Steve. There were 11 findings of misconduct. This was in the Queensland Supreme Court, Justice Paul Smith. Now, this was in a completely separate case to Jay Jang. This is with another taxpayer, another small business operator, a woman this time. She's been given the pseudonym in court of Julie Clark. Now, she's a mother of 5. She's running businesses. She was trying to develop a new therapeutic drug, and she claimed a tax offset on that drug, which if you're running businesses in research and development, these are quite common things that you can get a tax offset from the ATO to kind of encourage people to come up with innovative new products. And Justice Smith found that this woman had been put through, a 7-year, let's call it a saga, by the ATO, where once again she was having this dispute with them on the civil side about what tax she may owe, and then gets also hit with criminal charges. But Julie Clark got hit not only with criminal charges federally, but also the Queensland Police, a state fraud charge also. And Justice Smith found that the complainant on the state fraud charge, or the person who'd instigated this charge, was none other than Anthony Raines. So a former Queensland police officer, he's then referred some of this material to the Queensland Police. But what Justice Smith found is that Anthony Raines was essentially fabricating evidence. He was altering evidence. He was tendering witness statements that were misleading. And really importantly here, Steve, he had been removing exculpatory material. So when you're a prosecutor, when you're a police officer, you have to investigate everything that says this person's guilty, but you also have to investigate everything that says this person might not be guilty. And you have to put all of that material before the court so that that can then be argued in court. And that's a really important tenet of our justice system. And it was found in that case that key pieces of information, particularly in relation to that state fraud charge, were deleted from the material that was provided to the Queensland Police. And if you'd got the full picture on that, there would have never been a fraud charge laid on her. And what Justice Smith, some of the language they used on that, I mean, I've never read a judgment quite like it to be about one of our government agencies, an agency that we all need. We all need the tax office to do its job. It's a really important role in Australian society. It collects the revenue that allows the government to pay for things that we need. But we need it done in a fair way. And to read this judgment that said that the ATO had brought the administration of justice into disrepute, and that in this case, justice had been put at risk. Now, when you read that, I mean, it gives you shivers just to think, how is this happening in Australia right now? Now, that judgment is under appeal. The ATO has decided to appeal that judgment, so that will go to a court of appeal. But what's come out in that judgment is just, I think it's so serious that we need to be doing something about this. Now that we've got these two cases, and there are more cases still going through the courts, somebody needs to be looking into this and going, hang on, what is the ATO doing here? How are they operating in these investigations? Because Justice Smith found that the ATO gave scant regard to the policies that apply to it. That he also, another quote he had was that the ATO has acted like a law unto itself.
Yeah.
So, you know, and at the moment, we've been going to the tax office saying, okay, we brought you the Jay Jang story a few months ago. Now we've got the Julie Clark case. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about reviewing all of these other cases involving Anthony Raines? I get that you're appealing one of them, but wouldn't it be prudent to just look into all of these cases to be 100% certain that there aren't previous people put in jail over similar, you know, in similar cases with similar evidence issues? Or are there other cases going through the court right now that need to be addressed? And we thought that the ATO would take that seriously. They've replied to us and said, no, it's under appeal. Can't talk about it. It's under appeal.
About it, right?
And that means that it'll just be kick the can down the road for 12 to 18 months is how long that appeal could take. And then, you know, then maybe we'll do something. So it's a serious issue. And I think that, you know, we had interviewed Andrew Wilkie about it. He says that the government needs to now step into this. The government needs to do something about this. And so far, it doesn't look like they're going to be doing a whole lot about it.
Which is why what we do, right? And I know, Lizzie, you were pleased to see Dan out there catching up with Anthony Raines, the investigator.
Yeah, I mean, that was some extraordinary work from you, Dan, to catch up with him while he was on his morning walk with his dog. He didn't seem to want to have too much to say to you, though. No, he didn't, Lizzie. And, you know, despite these findings coming down in October, he is still a paid employee of the Australian Tax Office. We don't know whether he's been stood down or whether he's working on investigations. So we decided to go and find him ourselves and ask a few questions. He wasn't particularly happy to see us. He didn't answer any of those questions. But the really interesting bit about that, Lizzie, was that within a few hours of us trying to interview him, we had an email from the tax office to Nine's legal team that was titled Health and Safety Request. And they were inquiring about the health and safety of their employee, Anthony Raines, and they were worried that we might show his residence in that and that wouldn't be fair. Now, we did not show his residence in that story. But to juxtapose that, Lizzie, this is the bit that really got me, is that Julie Clark has been
fighting the tax office for 7 years, the last 4 years on her own as a self-represented litigant in court, which is just extraordinary. She told us in her interview that at times she wanted to end her own life. She thought the only way out of this, to relieve her husband and her 5 children of all this stress, was to end her own life. That's what she felt like doing. Now, you can imagine how many over that court time. I mean, she was on bail for 7 years. At one point, she was reporting to a police station 3 times a week for bail. Now, imagine running around 5 kids, just trying to be a mum, and also having to report to bail 3 times a week. So I said to her, Julie, has the ATO ever inquired about your mental health at any point? And she said, no, never.
No.
And I also put a question to the tax office and said, you know, have you taken into account the mental health of the taxpayer involved in this during this 7 years? Has that ever been taken into account? And they didn't answer my question. And that was the bit that really, got to me, because within hours of us merely trying to interview Anthony Raines, we had them emailing us about health and safety concerns, and yet here's this mother of 5 businesswoman with no criminal history. All of these cases that I've been looking at, Steve and Lizzie, none of these people have got any criminal history. They're just business people trying to run a business, trying to, pay what's needed to be paid in tax. If there's a tax incentive that they can get access to that. But they've tried, they seem to be trying to do it all above board, and then they get this just absolute sledgehammer approach from the ATO.
Yeah, as a journo, Dan, investigating a tax story, I mean, you've got to be so tenacious. You've got to get all the reports, get your facts straight, because you are up against a very powerful beast. You also have to take care of the human being who is at the centre of the story and make sure that they're okay. How difficult was it to, encourage these people to speak to you and to get their trust when their trust has been really rattled by a very powerful organisation?
Look, it's a very delicate topic, Lizzie, and the interviews that I did with Jay Jang and also his former employee Debbie Ingleton are probably some of the most difficult interviews I've ever done, because the devastating impact that this whole pursuit by the ATO has had on them. And Debbie Ingleton was his employee, and she was hit with that criminal charge as well for fraud, the one that was dropped after 2.5 years with no evidence to offer. The impact that it has on these people is just so significant. And so it's a very delicate interview to do, but it's also, they were just so happy that someone was finally listening to them. They were finally being heard, and that they knew that someone was going to take their story and give them a loud voice to be heard.
And Dan, what did Debbie's husband, who's sadly no longer with us, what was his final words to Debbie?
So Debbie's husband, Bill, was pursued by them as well, Bill Ingleton.
Yeah.
And he, when they finally got these fraud charges dropped and they finally were relieved of this years-long pursuit by the ATO, within a few months he was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. His doctors told him that it was stress-related and told Debbie that it was stress-related. He passed away within 12 months. And before he passed away, I think it was the final conversation that he had with Jay Jang was whatever you do, make these bastards pay for what they've done to us.
Yeah.
And Jay Jang is a businessman and runs, a very successful businessman now, despite what he's been through. His business is now thriving. But that comment that Bill said to him when we spoke to him about that's what choked him to tears, is just that thought. Because when people go through this, Steve, no one else knows what this is like unless you've been through it. And so Jay and Bill and Debbie, those three knew what this was like to be through this. But now these guys are starting to find each other. So Jay Jang is connected with Julie Clark. They've connected with Richard Boyle, the former tax office employee, who was a whistleblower about these aggressive debt collection practices. All the way back, I think, 2017, 2018, he could see these aggressive debt collection practices in place in his workplace, and he blew the whistle on that. And sure enough, the tax office then pursued him, charged him with criminal charges. They dragged on. He tried to get protections as a whistleblower, which in Australia are very limited. And he failed to get those protections, and he eventually had to very reluctantly plead guilty to, I think it started with 60 charges, a huge amount of charges. He was facing like 60 years in jail with what they charged him with. He eventually got that whittled down, and I think he pleaded guilty reluctantly to, I think it was 4 charges, and didn't need to serve any jail time. So he knows what it's like. And those guys are now connecting with each other, and they're finding more, because if you are ever the unfortunate one to be the subject of one of these pursuits of the tax office, it is a very lonely process from the people that I've spoken to, and thankfully now they're starting to find each other, because only each other knows actually what it's like to go through.
That huge toll, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dan, as a journo, what... You then sort of get personally invested in this story, because you've sat with these people for hours and you've listened to them on the phone, and it's you can't help but get involved and feel for them and want to do more. What more can you do as a journo, aside from asking the tough questions and putting those tough questions to the tax office and to the government?
Well, that's really all we can do, Lizzie, is just expose this and shine a light on this. And it's probably the most important thing that the Fourth Estate does in the media, you know. And unfortunately, that's sort of getting, you know, it's getting watered down, and people are criticising it. But, you know, we're the only ones that are doing that, and we've been doing it, you know, for hundreds of years, the art of journalism. So all we can do is expose what's happened, shine a light on it. What do they say? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. But in this case, what I'm really concerned about with this particular case is that the ATO are not answering our questions about what they're doing about it. They're saying there's an appeal coming. Okay, there's an appeal coming. We won't talk about that specific case, but what about the other cases? Can't comment. I've gone to the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions, the CDPP. That's who prosecutes these cases. I've gone to them. I said, what are you doing about these other cases? Are there more cases going through court? And specifically, I asked them questions, none of which were about the Clark matter, which is under appeal. They write back to me, they say, can't comment, that matter's under appeal.
That's got nothing to do with it.
So now I've gone to what I'm doing now, though, about it is taking it to federal government ministers. So the Assistant Treasurer, Daniel Molino, he's responsible for the ATO. I'm taking it to him. Treasurer Jim Chalmers, he's ultimately the overseer of the ATO, even if the Assistant Treasurer is the sort of go-between. I'm taking it to him. I'm also taking it to the Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, to find out what are they doing about this. This judgment from Justice Smith is extraordinary. Like, it really is one of the most extraordinary judgments you'd ever read about a government agency that affects all of us. We're all taxpayers. We all pay our tax, or we should. And now we're seeing here that, hang on, have they been doing the right thing in these investigations? Well, according to Justice Smith, no, they haven't been. So at what point is the government going to step in? And they've got issues because these are independent agencies, particularly the CDPP, that they operate very independently. But I'm trying to work out, Lizzie, at the moment, who polices the police? You know, if these are the guys that are doing the prosecuting. If they've made mistakes here, who's going to step in and police that? And that's where we need the Attorney General, the Federal Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, to come in and answer that for us and tell us what they're doing about it, because there's too many. This isn't just a one-off case that's now under appeal. We've already exposed another one of them, and there are more of these still going through court.
Yeah, one of the most telling images, Dan, was from the Julie story, your latest story on this. You said that she's been self-representing for 4 years now.
Yeah.
And there she was standing outside court with a suitcase and an extra bag full of documents and files and, you know, anything she could get her hands on to prove that, you know, she didn't have a case to answer. And yet, you know, she wins the case and there's an appeal lodged. I would just love to be a fly on the wall inside the ATO's lawyer's office when they were directed to lodge an appeal, given what they've seen firsthand in court.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom. I mean, you guys have both spent quite a bit of time in court, as we do, and just the thought of representing yourself. I mean, even representing yourself on a parking ticket would be stressful.
Yeah.
I've never done it. It would be stressful. You've got to speak, the right language of the law, follow the processes. Trying to represent yourself on a case as complicated as this for 4 years is just. It's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. And to then win is just even wilder. Now, the person who also needs to be commended here is the Supreme Court Justice Paul Smith, that he has actually conducted this hearing in a way that has that he's made it entirely fair for a self-represented litigant to not lose her way, because when I've sat in on cases with self-represented litigants before. And, the judges are always bending over backwards to ensure that they're being assisted through it, because if they're not, it'll be immediately appealed. And so Justice Smith has really, given her the ultimate fair hearing, and has then deemed what he's found, which is that, the ATO brought the administration of justice into disrepute. The other bit that he found that I find really interesting, guys, is that he actually found that in this case, the court was being used as the tool of oppression against Julie. He actually said that, the defendant must have been absolutely fearful of being unjustly convicted, which would carry a sentence of several years in jail. And she must have felt that no one was listening to her, because she'd been arguing on these issues about tainted evidence and misleading evidence for years and trying to get them struck out. And no one was listening to her. And now this judge, Paul Smith, did listen to her and listened to her in a fair way, and that's what he found. Now, obviously that judgment is being appealed now. It's being appealed by the CDPP at the instruction of the ATO, no doubt. That's a joint venture, even though the ATO tell me that it's a decision made by the CDPP. It is interesting that one of the grounds of appeal is that the judge attended to, or the conduct of the proceeding below was attended with an appearance of disqualifying bias. So that's the first ground that they're trying to appeal, which will be decided by a court of appeal. Now, if you want to put that into sporting terms, it's akin to losing a game of football and then at the end of it going, oh, the umpire was biased, we want that over again. So, that'll be interesting to see how they argue that a judge has displayed disqualifying bias, because his judgment was 332 pages long. And he appeared to go over every little square inch of this long-running case and handed down those findings that he handed down, which would not have been handed down lightly.
That's incredible, isn't it? 330 pages to come to a decision like that.
Yeah.
And then it gets appealed.
Appealed. Yeah.
Poor
Now, this
Julie.
is a very serious topic, Dan, and with serious consequences. However, two things can be true at the same time. And we did crack a little wry smile when we saw your bounce of the tax investigator. We want to know how steep was that hill you guys were walking up? Because someone was a bit out of breath.
It was a very steep hill. We had given away a bit of a start to actually catch up to him.
Okay.
And look, I really hope that he would have just stopped and talked to us, Lizzie. But
That's the opportunity was there.
But instead of stopping and talking to us, he actually went into another person's house who seemed to be known to him. But it wasn't his house, and just went in there seemingly to get away from our cameras. So, it was a bit of a long uphill chase, that one, that we hope that Mr. Rains might have stopped and talked to us, but he chose not to, so we had to push on, even if some of us reporters aren't as fit as others.
Must be the heat up there, Dan.
Humidity.
Well, someone did speak to you as a supporter of his, and she gave you a gobful through the car window. So thanks very much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Dan, look, you've brought up, you've exposed something that we did not know that was happening, and has had a profound effect on people's lives. And of course, we should mention that if the issues we've spoken about today do impact you mentally, then please do contact Lifeline at 1311
13 11 14.
Yeah,
they do some wonderful work at Lifeline.
They do indeed, yeah. But Dan, keep up the great work. Those two yarns were terrific, and much needed. And as you say, the Fourth Estate needs to be telling those stories and to have those whistleblowing laws strengthened.
Look, we're not going to stop digging on this one, Steve and Lizzie, because as I said at the start, once you see this stuff, you can't unsee it. Yep. And, a current affair always comes in to stick up for to support the little guy and give the little guy a fair hearing. And, I don't think you could get any more, than Julie Clark, a mother of 5, self-represented litigant. David and Goliath doesn't even start to explain how mismatched that battle is. So we'll continue digging. We'll find more cases, and we will keep asking those questions until something actually gets done about looking into this properly.
Yeah.
You're the right man for the job.
That's
Dan.
right. You can watch those stories on YouTube. Just punch in a current affair, and the keyword would be ATO on those two stories. So look for Dan's name as well. 9 Now is also, Instagram.
Catch up on all the archives and all the other investigations that Dan Nolan has done, because there is a long catalogue there to go through. You do a wonderful job, Dan. We're lucky to have you on our team at A Current Affair.
Well done, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. Okay, Lizzie.
Yeah, and if you guys at home have a story for us, please get in touch. It's aca@9.com.au if there's anything you think we should be looking into as well.
Keep them coming, because in the wake of Dan's stories on the ATO, we had a flood of emails come in from people who believe they're in the same boat as the victims, for want of a better word, that Dan highlighted in his story. So keep those emails coming in, guys. aca@9.com.au.
We better get back on the road.
Yes, indeed. That was a cracking chat.
Yeah, it was.
See you next time.
See you next time.